Thank you for joining a conversation about practicing the words, works, and ways of Jesus. I'm Steve Griffin, and this is Formation Through Following. Hey friends, let's talk about the myth of Christian nationalism. Years ago, I read a book that challenged nearly every lofty ideal of American mythology I had imbibed since early childhood. And while I've grown to appreciate the book, at the time I did not. There are indelible angry protestations etched in the margins of the book. But thankfully I could shelf the book, but not its claims and questions. I want to read an excerpt from the book. Quote, "Did Jesus ever suggest by word or example that we should aspire to acquire, let alone take over, the power of Caesar? Did Jesus spend any time and energy trying to improve, let alone dominate, the reigning government of his day? America as a nation has clearly never looked remotely like Jesus. There was nothing distinctively Christ-like about the way America was discovered, conquered, or governed in the early years. A significant segment of American evangelicalism is guilty of nationalistic and political idolatry. I believe many of us American evangelicals have allowed our understanding of the kingdom of God to be polluted with political ideals, agendas, and issues." End quote. Well, that is The Myth of a Christian Nation by Greg Boyd. Greg's book was so well received that it split his church in half. I should also mention that the book was written in 2006. Do I really need to say it? Things have precipitously devolved since its publication. The downward spiral is evidenced in the so-called rise of Christian nationalism, what I call Americanity. I'm not of the opinion that Christian nationalism is ascending per se. Rather, I think it's more a situation of an existing ideology being exposed, embraced, and extolled. It seems to me that the myth of a Christian nation emerges from an equally mythical Christian nationalism. At this point, perhaps it would be helpful to define nationalism. My understanding of nationalism, and this is my definition, is this: devotion to a heroic narrative of one's country and its role in the world. To be a tad more wordy, I would say that nationalism is fundamentalistic and ideological devotion to a heroic narrative regarding the past, present, and future of one's nation or empire and its role in the world. Now, please note, nationalism is unquestioning zeal for a story, not for a country or nation. In this regard, nationalism is very much distinguishable from patriotism. Patriotism is love and pride for one's country or nation, warts and all. Nationalism is allegiance to an unblemished narrative, no warts at all. Thus, the Christian nationalist badgers school boards, not over history, but over the narrative of history. What story are we telling ourselves? Not is it true, but is it what I believe? These are two very different questions. Christian nationalism is loyalty to a narrative, not a nation. This is why Christian nationalists quite frequently and cavalierly call for civil war. They fantasize that they are willing and capable of destroying the actual country in which they live for the fairy tale kingdom that resides in their minds. Who are the Christian nationalists' most hated enemies? I think it's their fellow citizens who do not subscribe to their story. It's this fervent despising of perceived enemies, fellow Americans, and this devotion to non-factual narratives that lead me to use the scare quotes around Christian nationalism. Don't get me wrong. Nationalism is very real. Christian nationalism is a myth. And this, despite its being practiced and propagated by pulpit and pen among the churched. But I no more believe in Christian nationalism than Christian Nazism or Christian Marxism. The Christian nationalists' words and ways are an indisputable revelation. They don't love their country too much. They love it too little. There's nothing Christian about that. Now, the Jesus way is the narrow way of love, especially love for one's enemies. I say especially because Jesus teaches us that love for one's family and friends is perfectly natural and is in no sense meritorious. I mean, it's good, but it's not meritorious. Therefore, the Jesus follower is called to love her country. Truly, deeply love it. Yet, the Jesus way is also the way of the kingdom of God above all other kingdoms. Clearly, this is antithetical to the Christian nationalists' mantra of America first. Now, keep in mind, America first is not a reference to the actual country, but to the nationalists' fanciful vision or revision of what the country once was and should be again. Let me put it succinctly. Jesus isn't American, and his kingdom is not the USA. The Jesus way is nowhere more explicitly expounded than in his masterful oration known as the Sermon on the Mount. In Anabaptist tradition, being formed by the Sermon on the Mount is what it means to be a Christian. I can think of no greater antithesis to the myth of Christian nationalism than the truth of Jesus' teachings. Many Christians and churches need to rethink their allegiance. Will they choose the myth of Christian nationalism or the truth of the way of Jesus? Now, I'm fully aware there are fallacious binaries and false dichotomies, but this isn't one of them. Well, that's all for now. Leave a comment or a question and join the conversation. Until next time, show the world a Jesus-looking God.